Hi Neil, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you joining this conversation. I want to kick off with more about you and your sort of journey into HR. It's typically a journey that always starts with an interesting story. So I'd be keen to kind of hear your beginnings into HR.
Yeah, so I studied psychology at university and didn't really want to become a psychologist. That wasn't really for me. I was quite interested in business, and someone suggested I studied what was the IPM, the Old Institute of Personnel Management, back then. And I thought, well, I've got nothing better to do. I might as well give it a go. And kind of probably didn't realise what it was like. Lots of people, hadn't really come into contact with personnel management or HR, and just went on from there. Did a couple of short jobs, just trying to get some experience, and started to realise that actually it was a really great way of being involved in business and having a kind of, if you like, a sort of human behaviour aspect to it. And it's gone on from there, really. Probably because I'm not capable of doing anything else. I've stayed doing something that people will pay me for and keeps me off the streets and out of trouble.
Did you find psychology helping you understand people development?
I do, and I think not enough people come into the profession, if I'm honest, with that angle. So they'll often come in from a business background or come in from having done a degree or studied straight into HR management. And I think just understanding people behaviours and systems is really, really helpful in getting change in organisations, in helping identify talent, all sorts of things. I think it is just a really good foundation.
Where have you seen that sort of worked for yourself in terms of in your capacity as HR director? I'm just going to make it HR director at Severn Trent. So if you've not mentioned that previously, where have you seen that being mostly applied in your role as HR director? And it's quite interesting because the word HR director or the title HR director encompasses quite a lot now rather than what it used to encompass.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So I kind of describe my job. I do three things. I help individuals, teams, and organisations to perform to the best of their capability, or the best of their ability. And I think that kind of the behavioural aspect of that particularly comes in place when you're looking at teams. So even executive teams, how you get the best out of them, how you understand different people's perspectives, how you can form teams that actually complement each other rather than go into conflict, but also kind of, working with individuals, whether it's the CEO or other execs, to help them to fulfill their potential. So I think that's where you really see it. But obviously that's the same throughout the organisation. But for me, those are probably the people I'm working with the most.
so how does it link with, for example, new talent then? So how do you kind of use some of them principles into new talent? And we'll touch on apprenticeship shortly after this, but
Yeah.
in terms of when you bring in new talent into the business, how does that help with that process?
So one of the things we're quite keen on in Severn Trent is using strengths to hire people rather than competencies. And I think that is really plays into this angle. So looking at individuals and their abilities, their strengths, their capabilities, and how they fit into the organisation and where they might fit in, rather than going out with a set of kind of competency-based questions and looking to rule people out. And I think that approach really plays into that new talent space. The idea that, and I think hopefully we'll touch a little bit on social mobility and social inclusion because I think particularly doing that helps people who may not have the coaching in the background from their school or their parents or their friends to help identify really what people are good at and then being able to find the right route for them in your organisation.
You touched on something which what I'm passionate about, social mobility, and yeah, I agree. Without mentoring, without the ability to have somebody who's been in that role or been in that journey, give you the support mechanisms in place to be able to achieve certain milestones within a particular job, it makes it much more harder. for that individual. Now, I want to kind of move onto green skills and green jobs, because that's something which is no doubt a big part of the sort of a strategic direction of Severn Trent. How do you define a green job or green skill to kind of start off with, and then what is the vision for Severn Trent around green jobs or green skills?
That first question. If I had a very simple answer for that, I'd be selling it literally to every organisation. I think it's really difficult to actually to put a wrapper around green jobs and green skills, because I think rather than it being exclusive to certain roles, I think what we'll see is that it come across lots of roles as an addition or a different lens onto the way they do work. So if I give you a good example, in terms of our engineers who are doing big construction programs.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally they would have looked at, what is the cost, what's the most cost-effective way of delivering a scheme. Now they're also looking at, what's the lowest carbon impact of a scheme. So how do you reduce the amount of concrete that's going into it? So a lot of the skills they have are still the same as before, but they're putting on a different lens to it. Or, carbon accounting, and how we look at that within organisations. So I think, perhaps not dissimilar to digital. When we started talking about digital, everyone was talking about digital jobs and digital skills, but actually it became part of lots of jobs, the way in which we do it. And I think that's what's going to happen with green. There'll be a small number, of very specific sustainability type roles, or it might be biodiversity roles working on that agenda, but the majority will be across existing professions and will be an addition to the work they do. And I think that's a really healthy thing, if I'm honest, rather than having it ring fenced in a small area.
So that means that any job can be potentially be a green job or encompass a green skill.
I believe so, pretty much so, over time, that all jobs will look at the way in which they can reduce carbon within their areas, in which they can improve kind of the net positive effect that their remit has on the environment. I think you'll see that more and more coming into all roles. Now, some will be, 1%, 2%, 3%, some will be 50%. So it's not all going to be the same. But I think it is just a way about thinking about work and thinking about business that is going to be really important.
Do you think that there will be, what is the incentive for an employer to have more green skills or green jobs outside of meeting the ESG goals, for example?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, isn't it? It's kind of Jeff Bezos had this phrase, Amazon, which is "your margin is my opportunity." And speaking to Tony Juniper from Natural Britain, or listening to him a few months ago, his argument was organisations that don't do this eventually will be overtaken by organisations that do. So it becomes a competitive advantage rather than it is simply just a side of the desk CSR initiative. And I think that probably is going to be the case. Now, whether that happens in the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think there's a debate around that. And I'm not sure I know the answer, but it is going to happen. So you might as well start now and get ahead.
Presumably then, sort of linking into apprenticeships could be a good starting point for green jobs and green skills, right?
Totally, and as you know, I sit on the board of IFATE that looks at apprenticeship standards as well. And we were having this debate only the other day, saying, there are certain standards that need to be created that don't exist at the moment or didn't exist before. So for example, heat pump installation is a good example of that, where there's a standard that needs to be there, but then also it needs to be played into all the existing standards. Mm-hmm. So to look and say, so what do people need to understand there? And I just think, apprenticeships for organisations are exactly the right way of starting to bring these skills in, and also providing opportunities to people within our communities who might not have other means to get into organisations such as ours.
Do you think I mean, just looking at the sort of range of apprenticeships you offer, how has that changed over the years in terms of when you started having apprenticeships, or when I say started, I'm talking largely around 2017 when the bigger changes came around apprenticeships. So you may have been investing in apprenticeships previously, but how has that developed over time? Because we are going through in this sector its own industrial revolution, or its own revolution, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, so it's increased, the range and the number has increased exponentially during that period of time. And I think, the kind of quality standard, the reforms that you're talking about, the kind of the quality stamp that was put on the standards at the time has really helped to extend that range of apprenticeships into areas such as finance, HR, law, sustainability, technology. Whereas maybe beforehand they were kind of seen as maybe more manual or entry level roles. We're really seeing that range come across. But I think the other thing we're really keen to do is stay true to the intention of apprenticeships, which is making them a route into employment that's additional to other routes into employment, rather than looking at upskilling too many people within the workforce in order to spend your levy, or doing things, or too many higher level apprenticeships and not enough that apply to people across the age ranges. So we're really keen to try and balance the two things.
Have you found apprenticeships having the impact in the organisation to essentially what you wanted, or has it surpassed what you thought it was going to bring to the company?
One of the things that I've been so pleased with Severn Trent is how everybody has really grasped the new talent agenda and seen it as a brilliant way of increasing diversity within the organisation, increasing our community impact, and getting really talented people into the organisation. That's everything from the Kickstart program that we ran during the pandemic. We had over 100 Kickstart placements, really, really talented people. Things like the 10,000 Black Interns program that we do, where we have been taking on hundreds of young interns coming in and learning about the organisation. And apprenticeships are absolutely fundamental and core to that. And so, we find the demand on us as a team, sometimes a little bit overwhelming, if I'm honest, rather than us
Yeah.
going out saying, oh, we need to get you to take an apprenticeship. They're coming saying, well, I want 10 of these and I want 5 of those. And we're having to kind of go, give us a bit of time to get this organised. And that's a great thing, a great place to be in.
And if you were to change one thing about the apprenticeship system as it is, I know you sit on IFA board, so there may be things you can and can't say, but if there's a general statement that you'd give in terms of what you'd like to see different about an apprenticeship system that we could use, what would that be?
Yeah, so I think organisations complain too much about the apprenticeship system. So I do think that no system is perfect, and I think it's very easy for employers to complain about the levy or complain about duration of standards and things like this. I think the one thing I'd change, if I'm honest, is organisations offering more of, if you like, the lower level apprenticeships, and really keeping a focus on creating those opportunities rather than trying to look at the expensive ones that draw down as much as they can. Because I think that's the spirit of this. That's what we should be doing as businesses.
The level twos, you mean? And I think there's
Yeah.
a big debate about level twos. I think the NHS are really desperate for some change around the level two business admin, and I think there is going to be a constant debate about it in terms of the skills we actually need and the skills we think we need in businesses. Talking of skills and AI, which is coming to the forefront of a lot of conversations. Firstly, what's your initial thoughts on AI, and more importantly, do you see a fit for AI in the world of recruitment and skills?
Yeah, so I guess if I take a step back and I look at it societally, I think the moment is now for government to step in and define how they want AI the role they want AI to play in society. And I don't believe that a kind of free market view on that is right for society. And you've only got to look at, where social media's gone to understand that maybe if, you had your time again, we could have gone back and actually set some parameters around it that would have been more beneficial for society. That said, it's clearly, an enormously powerful tool if used in the right way. And I do think that there's applications in recruitment. I think there's applications across HR. So I've seen some really cool stuff where, people have put job descriptions in and then got them to write the kind of best ad or to summarize kind of the kind of person that would be good for that kind of role. I can see a way in which you can, create really engaging kind of correspondence through it and using it to do some of that. I would love to see in time it used to try and improve inclusion and diversity. I'm nervous because I don't know what biases are built into this thing, and we've seen with technology historically that's really problematic. But if we could assure ourselves of that, I think that would be a phenomenal use for it as well.
Do you think colleagues across a workforce should be more aware of the capabilities of AI? And when I say that, I mean not just at executive level or team leader level or HR business partner level or director level, but I mean people on the front line, people on who may be, if you want to use Severn Trent as an example, some of the engineers who may be on the field work, doing the field work. Do you think the capabilities of AI should be better learnt by the people on the ground too?
I think there's not need for everyone to be a PhD level knowledge on it, and I think in organisations I kind of use this analogy quite a lot. You need very few PhDs and lots of BTECs, quite frankly, because you need people to know how to use it. You don't necessarily need them to know the ins and outs of it, and I think until we see the maturity of the technology, I probably don't want people too distracted on playing around with it. If you go onto ChatGPT, you can lose hours just kind of going into it, and that's probably not the most productive thing until we've worked out the best uses. But I do think it is worth people having an understanding of how it might play out in organisations and in their jobs. But then I also think at the same time we need this debate around the kind of ethics of use within organisations and making sure that at the same time we're fulfilling our social commitments, our social purpose, making sure that we're creating good jobs for people. Because I think, no technology should ultimately be at the cost of humanity. And if we do that, then we're heading in the wrong direction.
And there's this thing as a fair usage policy that they use when it comes to just getting data from a mobile network company, where you have a fair. They use the word unlimited, but it's actually a fair data usage policy that allows you to use a fair amount of data rather than excessive amounts of data. And my concerns regarding AI into the fold is when it comes to employment and skills, is that we'll spend too much time trying to think whether it's good or not, and not enough time trying to build the capabilities within the workplace or workforce. And I think that the loss will be that we'll end up moving slower than a lot of other countries, because we're still thinking about how it's whether it's beneficial or not. Do you think that do you know how, for example, there is a basic level of digital skills in a workplace? Digital now, the word digital meant a particular thing. Now it means so many different things. But under them different branches, whether that be using a computer, whether that be access computer and basics of internet, etc. Do you think the basics of AI, skills in AI, should be taught throughout the talent pipeline?
Yes, it's a really good question. I mean, as somebody who was around at the early days of digital when we were looking at that, I think one of the problems was trying to nail down, actually, to your point, what it was and what it wasn't, and therefore what do you teach people and what don't you teach people. And I think, consumer technology will always move faster than enterprise technology, because because it just does. People adopt stuff in their personal lives way quicker than they do at work. I do think as you know, I don't know if we've got a clear enough grasp on AI just yet, but I do think your point is right, that we can't wait for it to be fully defined before we start to play it into a kind of skills and education. And we've got to be comfortable with iterating as it develops and as it moves on. But at the same time, I'm not sure, and maybe this is just my lack of knowledge, right? I'm not sure we have a strong enough grasp of how it plays out yet to be able to properly build it into talent and skills. But it's definitely something we need to keep a watching brief on and start to do it at the right moment in time. Because you're right, you know, as a country, as an economy, we don't want to lose out to other economies, but at the same time, we also don't want to be too hasty, make mistakes that are at the cost of society without recognising the implications of that.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, that is. I think it's a fair place to leave this convo, and I really appreciate your time, Neil.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.